Welcome to Joe's Astrology. We're talking about the progressed horoscope, specifically the progressed moon. And if you don't know what that is, maybe I'll cover it in another video. It's the progression, very simply, it's the progression of the planets in your natal chart as the years go on. And it creates a new chart. And specifically, we're looking at the moon, which will pass. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's like every maybe two, I guess it is every 2.5 years, it passes through a house. And I'm going to show you in this video how this is what this brings to mind and makes me think of when I see this, because the effects of the progressed horoscope, and really just all the stuff I talk about in general, but specifically the progressed horoscope, makes me think of the importance of family, marriage, anything, a home, anything that has a grounding effect in life. Because, I mean, for most, it depends on a lot of things, but for most people, I can see why those things are valued by society. I'm not sure that society knows really thinks this way, and these are the real reasons why. But from a security standpoint, these would be the reasons why. Because the moon passing through the progressed horoscope can mess you up. It can. I'm going to show you that in these videos, not to try and scare anyone. Also, why maturity and understanding is so important in all of these areas of life too. So the progressed horoscope. Let's go through the first house. The moon passing through the first house of the nativity or the progressed horoscope will bring all matters connected with the personality to the fore, and much will depend upon the native's own actions and upon his own attitude of mind as to how the directions operating will affect him. The position generally tends to break up existing conditions and consequently sometimes affects the health in accordance with the strength of the moon at birth or the solar influences operating in the progressed horoscope. As the moon going over the cusp of the ascendant nearly always produces changes, it will be well for him to note carefully the kind of changes he desires so as not to make mistakes. In a general sense, he may expect the personality to come more to the fore and all matters connected with the form side of existence to engage his attention more than previously. And as the moon now commences that half of her circle which lies under the earth, he must prepare for the change of condition which the moon's passage over the ascendant nearly always brings. For as has been stated elsewhere, the lower half of the horoscope, houses 1 through 6, concerns the personality chiefly rather than the individuality. So moon passing through the first house, among other things in astrology, is going to bring changes could affect the health, personal matters. So I'm just going to look at my progressed horoscope just to give you some examples here. In the first house, when the moon was progressed across my ascendant and through my first house, right around that time, my mother had died. I was changing to, I think I was around 28 years old, also going through Saturn return, and was changing careers. I wouldn't call it a career, changing jobs. I had been involved in many different things. Some things were coming to fruition that I was trying to make happen for a while. Just very chaotic stuff. But then right when the moon went into the progress to the first house, there was the death, and I was very sure that this is what I was going to do for a long time. This new job, this new business that I was creating, had nothing to do with astrology. And that was the moon passing through the first house. It also went conjunct my Mars in my natal chart, and the job had to do with competition. It had to do with athletics, sports. So that occurred, and it would make a trine to Saturn in the progressed chart. So you see the Saturnian influence of the new position, that kind of that thing working out, so to speak. And that would go on for about 2 to 4 years before it really began to culminate. So let's get into the moon progressed through the second house. The moon passing through the second house will bring to the fore all matters connected with finance. There are many advantages to be gained from the moon's passage through the second house. For any good aspects that the moon receives during each month will tend to be profitable from a financial standpoint, and those who are able to take advantage of this can nearly always find means to increase their incomes either through judicious investment or through engaging the mind in general financial affairs to their own benefit. It is a good position for those who have the inspirational faculty, for imaginative and historical authors, etc. So, talking second house, we're talking finance, we're talking real estate, we're talking values. And one thing I want to bring up here, this does not mean that you're going to get rich, or it really depends on what you're involved in. So let's use me as an example again. Moon's passing through, it's 2012-ish, halfway through 2012, and the moon's entering the second house. It's going to make a trine to Jupiter in my natal chart, trine to Jupiter and Uranus in my natal chart and the progress chart. Let's see what else. It's making a sextile to Mercury in the progress chart. It's going to make an inconjunct to Saturn. And the big thing here is what financially happened to me. Well, here's what happened. As I said, my mom had died. There was a small inheritance that at the time to me wasn't that small, but it was a decent amount, and I had not even thought about it until this point. See, I think I had access. I don't even know if I had access to it until like the first year was up, but I had not even thought of it. I just tucked it away, and then it started my thinking about it and what I was going to do with my business. I was going to use some of that money to start this business and make more money. So there was that. And then there was also an internet business that I had started that increased my income and allowed me to continue on this path. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to give an example of. Did it really increase my finances? Like, it not really, but in the context of what I was doing, yes, my income went up. But I was still considering myself poor, aside from having the inheritance. So there's that. And as I said, it's going to make a trine. If I progress the moon some more, right around where it makes a trine, or close to when it makes a trine, I started this business. And in theory, I had myself a job now that was going to be secure, that lasted for the next 3 years. And I do think, even though, again, I do not consider myself making money at this point, I still consider myself poor. But I loved what I did, and I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun, Jupiter, etc. I was making money. I did have some really big months, and you can look at the other transits and things in the chart. But I just want to make that clear that this is the thing about getting manifestation I talk about, and making money and stuff like that. If you're not in something that's headed in that direction, or that makes sense, and you have these transits, it's probably not going to happen. Like, I would have been better off being a banker for like 8 years. If I was a banker for like 8 years as a bank manager, and then had this transit, maybe become like a branch manager or something, and then my income goes up, something like that. Because what I was doing, it was not gonna happen like that quick anyway. So there's that second house progressed moon. See if there's anything else I want to say about this. And as he's speaking about finance, he didn't mention anything about relationships. So I also want to mention this as well. Other opportunities that would lead to being profitable. I had two opportunities that I can remember. I had two opportunities to potentially get in a relationship and be married. Now, one I didn't pursue at all for some reason. I'm just thinking that if I would have pursued her, and she was a client of mine, and if I would have pursued her, knowing where she went recently after that, she got married. That could have been something that could have happened. Don't ask me why I didn't. I was so obsessed with my business at that time. I was very picky as well, way more picky than I am now. I can't say that, but just I don't know. That's all I will say. That could have been something that, if I would have pursued, there would have been a financial increase just by the fact of being married. Then there was another person who came on to me, who was a doctor, and she probably made $200,000 to $300,000 a year, and I declined to even go out to meet. She was another client. I declined to even go for a coffee date with her because I was not interested in her romantically at all. But had I been, you're talking, and there's a relationship there, and there's a marriage, etc. You're talking about now. Your wife makes $200,000-$300,000 a year, so you can see how my finances would have increased dramatically through a marriage. And there was also actually one more as well, who I was interested in, who I met on a dating app that came out of nowhere, because dating apps up to that point had sucked for me, especially around where I'm at now. And she rejected me, and I was definitely interested in her. She rejected me, got married shortly after, say within 6 months, and had a family. So one of them would have probably made me pretty wealthy or have a lot of money. The other two would have been just an increase. So that was all while the moon was progressing in the second house. And why is that important? Well, because those were I consider those real opportunities. And when I get into the moon, progress moon, the third, you're going to see why all of those went away. They were not there. They're non-existent, and new things had come into the life. So let's check out the moon progress to the third. The moon passing through the third house will affect the mental conditions, giving great activity in all matters connected with the mind, stimulating to greater thought, and also tending to bring changes. As the lunar orb is below the earth, the native will be liable to brood over his conditions, desiring to alter in some way the environment in which he is placed. And so this progression of the moon through the third house never fails to give some restlessness, while it also brings one into close contact with relatives, persons who have some claim upon the native. The objective consciousness will be far more active than the subjective, the mind being more drawn towards objects and externals, and by these means stimulated and rendered more inclined to think deeply. So, moon going through the third. Mental conditions, restlessness. I would say this business that I had, third house, towards the end, was came to an end January, February of 2017. And right as the moon went into the third, the end of 2016, I became restless. Things have changed in my business, and it could have continued, but I would have had to hustle again, all over again, as I did in the beginning. And the business was going down, and I would either have to hustle, pick up another job, be very bored, do things I didn't want to do, all very feasible to continue. However, summer was looming, and summer was torturous at the time with this business. I didn't want to go through with it again. And I gave it up. So that's you think of moon, this third house, the erraticness, restlessness, changes, as he says here, tending to bring changes, stimulating greater thought. I had become aware of how I was limiting myself from my personal life, and began to brood, as he says, over my conditions in life, desiring to alter them in some way, to alter the environment in which I was placed. And I did alter my environment. I moved where I had been living for 5 years. I consider myself poor, I would say, and I moved into a nice apartment where I was, at least on the surface, did not look poor anymore. There was that, and it was like the whole thing was very, what's the word? It was very magical. Let's put it that way. That I was even to do this whole thing happened. So my environment changed. It was very, very comfortable there for a period. The moon went over my Chiron. I would say Chiron's in the 4th in my natal chart. And that's really what this all did. It kind of gave me a home. I was very comfortable in this new place. It felt like home as the moon went over that Chiron. And then, of course, the moon's still passing through the 3rd house. And I still didn't like my situation socially. So what did I do? I moved. I changed locations. I had tried to change locations for like, I can't tell you how many years I tried to change locations, especially for this in this field of work. Nothing would work for me. All of a sudden it worked. At least I thought it worked. And I had moved. Again, gave up my nice place, moved. Let's go back to my 3rd house. And it talks about the stimulating greater thought. I mean, I was reading books. I was reading books voraciously. I had these ebooks. I had access to like any book that I wanted. And this is actually when I started studying astrology as well. And I was reading books on astrology. I was doing astrology readings on Facebook. Stimulating greater thought at this time. I became vegetarian. I thought I knew. I mean, I've always had this bent towards me, but I really thought I knew more than everybody else. And at that point, to be honest, from what I've been through, you think I would know better. But nope, I still didn't learn my lesson. I still don't know if I learned my lesson. But lesson of relativity, 3rd house. And see here, the moon, as I said, went over that Chiron. It didn't make... The progress chart doesn't look like it really made any more aspects, important aspects. But as I said, change locations, and let me see what the date is on that. Night 2000. Yeah, then we move into the 4th house. I think those are the major things there. Let's move on to the 4th house. And by the way, the 3rd, with the progressed moon going through the 3rd house, I did have a lot of short journeys, moving, trying to move, coming back. A couple times didn't work out, which I'm not going to get into. And I also had a lot of car trouble as well. I think I went through like 3 flat tires at least, just for no reason, just flat tire over and over again. Get a new one, flat tire. And so let's get into the 4th moon passing through the 4th house. The moon passing through the 4th house. Let's change it up here. On the right, you can see my progressed horoscope. And on the left, I have the book that I'm reading from. And let me just say this. As the moon, here's the moon at 16 degrees, Gemini. And as the moon went into the 4th house, I was staying at my aunt's. As I said, I was staying with a relative. I was staying with my aunt from January to April. And I was giving her a hard time. I was like, I can't find a place to stay, etc. I was looking for a room for rent. And I was being picky because of everything that I went through. And it took me 4 months to find what I thought was the best possible place I was going to find for the best possible price. And that was as the moon, you can see here, just passes over the 4th house cusp in the progressed chart. See if there's anything else before I get started. All right, the moon passing through the fourth house of the nativity will tend to awaken interest in all domestic affairs, causing the native to have his mind concerned about his residence, and may bring changes and removals, or at least make him restless and desirous of change. From an occult standpoint, the moon's passage through this house is favorable, as it will precipitate many things that have been held in suspension. So the suspension wasn't that long. As I said, 4 or 5 months. It did precipitate what had been held in suspension. There will, moreover, be an occult vein running through the native's consciousness, whether he recognizes it as such or not, this being one of the psychic houses in all of which the moon has some strength, being able to receive all the vibrations that are active in the nativity. It will have a correspondence with the latter half of the day, from sunset to dawn, making this the best portion of the day for him for the time being, and will also bring him into touch with persons who are likely to affect him in the home life. I was doing a lot of late night reading, which I don't do now at all. I mean, I'm pretty much in bed. Not too many years later, I was in bed. Now, some drastic changes occurred, but I mean, I'm pretty much in bed by like 8 or 9 o'clock. And at the time, I was reading these ebooks late at night on my computer. I was also doing a lot of investigation into magical circles and magical books. And I won't get into some of my opinions, but I made some conclusions during that time. For sure, during that fourth house transit, he was talking here about the occult, about psychism and whatnot. Although the moon, the persons who are likely to affect him in the home life, I don't know that I really encountered any of that. I know I had the guy that I was living with, I had a little bit of trouble with towards the end, because I told him what I was looking for up front, and that I wouldn't move in without that happening. And it was, some things changed, and that didn't. Well, it still worked out essentially. But also, on another side note, I did try to move a couple times before the moon progressed in the fourth house, and I had some really good deals that my illness at the time prevented me from leaving, even though my aunt was pushing me to leave so hard that I was just pushing myself, and it did not occur until that moon hit that fourth house cusp. At least, like I say, I wasn't healthy enough until that point. Although the moon in one sense has not much strength when passing through the fourth house, still she has a natural sympathetic relation with it, owing to Cancer, the natural fourth house, being the sign of the moon. Now, the guy that I moved in with, I will say this, he had his own house. It was his own townhouse. He was a homey guy. He had a family. I mean, he had a family that he valued. It wasn't like an all-together, put-together, he had his parents divorced, and they had a stepbrother, I think, or stepsister, and that was really cool. You know, I had that experience with this fourth house thing. He did end up meeting a girl and pretty much getting married, almost like not shortly after I left. I left after about a year. And let's get into what else happened here, because as the moon went through the progressed chart, I'm going to show you here what else occurred that has to do with the home. So here we are, and still have this moon going through the fourth, and here it is at 2 degrees Cancer. So during this month, my north node is at 4 degrees Cancer, and you can see the north node at the point that the moon progressed in the fourth house to the north node. My previous forget about the thing I said. I'm sorry about the illness. The illness thing. That was something. I'll have to cut that out. So, at the point that the moon moved to the north node, and I was made aware. Two things happened. One, I got a job that was gonna be finally a very secure job. Uh, at least I thought it would be a secure job, moving out of the area to where I wanted to be. And it took me a while to get that job. I was made aware of that. That happened. And then pretty much the day or the week that happened, I was made aware that I was very, very sick from an illness that I had from not taking care of myself the last several years. And that came to a head all as the moon progressed through the fourth house with the north node there. The north node's in my sixth, the house of illnesses or health. And I was forced to move that's when I was forced to move to my aunt's again. And she had to take me in for 4 months, and then eventually forced to move back in to one of my father's apartments later as that moon finally goes through the fourth house. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. This idea, lots of stuff with the home nurturing, the family really coming through here with this moon going through the fourth house. And if I hadn't been sick, if I would have been taking care of myself and I wouldn't have got sick, you can see I would have moved. And assuming that this was actually a stable position, which I think it would have been, and I was working it would have been in the home housing industry, I would have made a move there in the fourth house. So not always easy to predict what's going to happen. Now, the moon passing through the fifth house tends to awaken the emotions in connection with love affairs, children, pleasure generally, and even games of hazard, gambling, or business enterprises, for this house governs everything of a speculative nature. It is a good period to engage in investment or speculation and to seek pleasures generally. In certain respects, the fifth house has sympathy with the emotions. That is, the fiery emotions, or those of the heart, as distinguished from the watery, or those of the physical senses. So getting into this idea of love affairs, children, at this point, there you can see the moon going through the fifth. It's at 13 degrees, 13 degrees Cancer. It's approaching my seventh house cusp, and we're looking at April 2021. At this point, I was in recovery for this illness. I was not working, and I was at as I said, at one of my father's properties, and because I wasn't working, I was doing a lot of surfing the web on dating apps, because me going out was more or less just going out to get out of the house. I was really, really messed up, to be honest with you. And I remember I had met someone, a Leo, a fifth house moon. I met someone, a Leo, online who I was very compatible with, astrologically. Unfortunately, she was much younger, probably in her early 20s, and she was going through some interesting things. But I was playing that game because I was pretty much homebound. So there was that. And lots of fiery emotions, let's just say fiery emotions of the heart, etc. And then let's move this moon. Let's move a year ahead. So that would be April. Oh, so some other things happened. I was forced to go somewhere where I was, let's just say, unavoidably detained for a while. And I met some people in there, particularly one person that you would never expect to meet there. And she was ticking off these feelings. This particular person was ticking off these fifth house sympathies. And also, when you notice, you can look at the progress chart. You see the sun in Pisces, and the rising in Pisces, according to this book, is altogether very unfortunate for the most part. So combine that with what was going on in my life, you can really tell what that you can really tell that things are not going to move forward very quickly. So then there was a time, fast forward another year, I met another person online who was more who I would have met in person, and another very good encounter for 6 months until the moon went to the 6th. So we'll come back to that. So lots of what I would consider this Leo romance, etc. in this time period. For me, anyway, that was a lot. That was more than usual. Not to mention, I was also on dating apps as well, to using them in different ways to much success, getting lots of dates and FaceTimes, etc. More so than I normally would. Right now, I'm not doing any of that. So, let's see. In certain respects, the 5th house has sympathy with the emotions, tending to awaken all feelings of the native to the utmost, and allowing him to give vent to them along those lines of least resistance, which are offered when the moon is passing through this house. When, however, she is receiving evil aspects, care will have to be taken where the feelings are concerned. Similarly, also in matters of speculative nature, for financial losses are then probable, but under good aspects, the native may invest to advantage or profitably engage his mind in any speculative adventure which prudence may sanction. So you can see here I think with the sun and the sun in Pisces rising is really, and in considering the situation I was in, you can see what he's saying here. The evil aspects to care will have to be taken, and you can see what I would say when you're talking about, like, considering this situation. If you're dating, take from the dating world. If you're dating in your local community, it's not as much can go wrong, or exactly. As far as when you're dating from like far distance, it's very, very difficult. So also, this Mercury was conjunct my Venus at the time of that in-person meeting. So that is interesting. So let's go to the moon passing through the 6th house. Okay, back on screen here. Moon passing through the 6th house. The moon passing through the 6th house, not altogether a fortunate house for the moon to pass through, as it tends to bring some sickness or indisposition, will therefore be likely to affect the health, which should be well guarded during this period. The native should also be very careful in dealings with inferiors, as this is one of the unfortunate houses of the nativity, although it is true that it gives some psychic tendencies, but this is merely owing to the latent side of the nature being awakened. All afflictions that the moon receives while passing through this house will be likely to affect the health and cause indisposition unless careful attention is paid to hygiene, and hence will probably prove to be commencement of any ill health that will follow. So it gets into this health stuff. Let's look at the chart here. When the moon was passing into my 6th, it was in the sign of Leo. And at this point, right around when it moved, let me see if I can get this accurate. Right around when it moved into the 6th, or if it was close to the 6th, this relationship I spoke of became very difficult. And that moon, again, made an opposition to that Mercury. The Mercury went off of my Venus. Let's see here. And then talking about work and health, I had been for the next 2 years up until now, because then the moon goes into it's just about to go into the 7th, progress into the 7th house. Up until now, I've had very difficult time with work considering the past. So there was that. Maybe went through 4 or 5 different jobs, part-time jobs. And so just very much, as you see here, passing through the 6th, and not altogether a fortunate house for the moon. And no matter what I did, that was the case. And there was some, even though my overall health has improved, just as far as like regular sicknesses, I think it's been worse than normal as far as allergies go. So there was that. Hopefully that improves as the moon goes into the 7th, which it already is improving, but very careful in dealings with inferiors. And most of my problems at work had to do with inferiors. In other words, younger people. I wouldn't say they're inferiors at my job, but essentially they are inferiors by age. So there was that. And as I said, no matter what I did, it just didn't matter. It just didn't matter. So it says here, therefore, when such afflictions occur, the native should take care to keep the health in good order, so that when the moon meets any benefic aspect to other planets, he may use those vibrations for improving his general health. For this house intimately connected with hygiene, and is just as powerful for benefiting the health as impairing it being related to the regulations or adjustment of the physical system generally. So the moon passing through the 7th house. Now here I don't really have any examples unless I go back to, which would have been, which I might do. If I go back to the year, I'd have to go back pretty far, like 1996. I don't know if I can remember that far. 96. The moon passing through the 7th, a house that is connected with marriage, unions, partnerships, and association with others, that the native is likely to be brought into contact with others who will greatly influence his life, and he may enter into partnerships or unions to his great advantage, if done while the moon forms a favorable aspect to any of the other planets, which is not self-afflicted. This does not mean that you'll be married. Obviously I didn't get married when I was 13, or even an adult. The person that I was speaking of, she had a 7th house, a moon passing through the 7th house in the progressed chart, and she didn't get married. In fact, when she met me, it was the 8th house. I think it was 8th house. So it really depends on a lot of different things you're going to look at. But here you see you can't see, but the progressed moon, the progressed sun was also in the first, well, it's always in the first, but it was in Aquarius as well. And the rising was in Aquarius. So let's get into it here, because I did meet somebody now that I'm thinking about this. Let's move it to 1990. It would have been an 8th. Actually, it might have been an 8th house. Let's move it to 1998. So 1997, that's when I started high school. So there was, I'd say, let me just say this. Middle school for me was very much involved with the other person. Very much, I had a lot of relationships in middle school, actually. Like, just kid stuff. All favorable influences come from the moon while she passes that would tend to unify the native with others and bring him in contact with those whose lives will run parallel with his own, but no ties or attachments, no unions particularly should be formed when the moon in her progress to the 7th meets any affliction. So he's saying when the moon is making bad aspects, you shouldn't commit to anything long term, which makes sense, kind of like an election. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't have relationships. You just didn't want to finalize a marriage or something like that. Now, I will say this, somebody I met in 8th grade, I tried to go to public school because of these things, actually. I tried to go to public school. She was in my 8th grade. She went to public school. When I was in high school, I was like sick of my sophomore year. I was ready to leave, and I tried to leave, and I ended up coming back to Catholic school, and it was a whole mess. The nature of the aspects the moon meets should be carefully noted so that the best time to become united or attached to others may be observed. The natal aspects between the respective rulers of the 1st and 7th houses and any affliction thereto should be carefully borne in mind, and all testimonies duly weighed. I think the way to do this is you live your life. You live your life, and then you can look at the chart if you want to look at it. You look at the progress chart. You're getting married. You just met someone. Look at the progress chart. See what it looks like. Especially if any big decisions are coming up. And even then, you're still going to live your life. But it's fun to look at. The moon passing through the 8th house. So that's when, again, it must be this. What did I say that? Oh, it was the 8th for the other person. I do think the 8th, I don't think he says it talks about death, and actually with the moon passing through the 8th, my sister did die when I was 15, with the moon passing through the 8th, and then I did meet someone, there's only been a couple people that I thought were potential marriage partners, and I did meet someone late with the moon passing through the 8th, who I thought was a potential marriage partner. And that would have made a trine to Juno. It looks like. Juno, the asteroid of marriage. I'm not going to get into the other aspects. There's just way too much. The moon passing through the 8th, considered the house of death. It is probable that deaths may occur in the native social circle or deaths will in some way affect him. In a higher sense, however, the passage of the moon through this house has a very deep significance, for it awakens interest in occult matters and usually brings some phase of the occult very prominently into the life. Hence, the native is likely to have some of his inner senses stimulated into greater activity by this lunar position, but much, of course, would depend upon the aspects that the moon forms to other planets during her passage through this house. Talks about legacy, losses, other in relation to partner's income. All this stuff has to do with the 8th house. I was very much involved in people at the time. I was working at a pizzeria. These people were big in other people's money. They were didn't pay taxes, things like that. I was working under the table. I was getting paid cash. I was making boatloads of money for at the time, and for what I considered what a lot of money was. And I had big opportunities with that, starting with that moon in that area of life, with that moon going through the 8th house. What really fucked me is my south node in the 12th conjunct Neptune. My dreamy disposition really fucked me. 9th house Pluto, 9th house Saturn. But oh well, live and you learn. Let's move into the moon in the 9th.